I think Jack suggested this video.
It's Pepe's become kind of a symbol.
Chairman Meow.
To this day, after the time in history when it was founded, we still need communism.
The gentle laborer shall no longer suffer from the noxious greed of Mr. Krabs.
Said if you could go back in time and kill baby Hitler, would you? I need to know. Hell yeah, I would.
Shout out, Jeb.
Many funnies.
Shout out, Jeb. Always an ally. Okay. Now.
And now, I don't know how that happens, but we're back with our panel from Vermont, Bernie Sanders, the senator.
Oh no.
Host of Showtime's The Circus, John Heilman, and actor and comedian Russell Brand are back with us. Okay, so here are the questions people wrote in. I guess this is for you because it mentions the Brit Awards. What does the panel think of the discussion around the Oscars getting rid of gender-specific categories like Best Actor and Best Actress, and how did it work out at the Brit Awards?
Who cares?
I'm a person who's never won.
Who cares?
I feel confident in saying
who cares?
It's Bill Marshall. What do you expect?
Real principles and values. Unless someone wants to give me an award, in which case I'd like to make it as specific as possible so I could bloody well get it.
But am I wrong that at
that was kind of funny? I can't.
Oh my god, I fucking hate this boomer, dude. He's trying to like make this like, dude. We need less categories. Nobody wants to sit through the award shows. They're just streamlining it, dude. Chill the fuck out.
Music?
I hosted that before, but I'll tell you, Bill, that I was able to let go of the experience and have never thought about it since. I feel that it might be fundamentally meaningless.
Okay.
I can't find meaning in it.
But
I've looked.
What I read was it used to be best male, best female.
Shut
and they
the
just
fuck
cut
up,
out
dude.
the categories,
Move
and it was
on.
one. Like it was the only people who won it was 4 men and Harry Styles.
Yeah, I think
The video's a bit jittery.
they should just give awards to Harry Styles, and that can be an industry.
Okay.
And we'll watch the world incinerate while Harry Styles dances beautifully.
What is the likelihood?
Is it still jittery? Because I did have.
Or we eat them.
It seems like.
And
let me be non-funny. Your point about sickness and the possibility of future pandemics absolutely speaks to the need for international cooperation.
Russell Brand can't wait to talk about
pandemic,
GMOs.
it's not going to be an American issue. It's not going to be a Chinese issue. We're going to have to bring the world together to deal with climate, to deal with pandemics.
Okay. Should law enforcement be policing TikTok in order to crack down on illegal trends like the viral challenge to steal Kias and Hyundais? Oh, yeah.
That is not why TikTok should be banned. That is pathetic.
Bro, what
That
is
is actually
the show?
a good reason not to
What is the show?
ban TikTok. I know that there was a trend to steal Kias and Hyundais, but if I did, I would have downloaded TikTok.
Who writes these cards for him? Bernie Sanders is here. Like, and this is what you're going to talk about? Like, he's like, I just want to talk about healthcare. Like, look at him. He's so defeated. Like, he just wants to talk
billionaires.
about healthcare. He just wants to talk about how billionaires shouldn't exist. He's here to promote his fucking book, man. Come on.
It is.
TikTok videos that show how you could, with just I think a screwdriver and a iPhone charger, you can hotwire a Kia and Hyundai. So like they're being stolen left and right. What do you think about TikTok?
That's actually sick as fuck.
Somebody
That's
has
awesome.
a bill to ban TikTok, certainly for people under 16. I think that's Josh Hawley's.
Well, I think the concern is TikTok is a Chinese-owned company, and you're seeing states and the U.S.
Well done,
government not wanting to use it for fear that some secretive information could fall into Chinese hands.
Well, but also it's rotting the minds of our young
Well,
people.
it's a whole other story, but that's beyond TikTok.
This whole boomer thing, like, dude, yeah, there's so many movies where it's like the phone is actually bad, and it's like that's the scary part of the movie. The horror is that it's a viral trend, and the Jabberwocky is gonna come for you.
Isn't it?
Yes, but TikTok is not helping.
I would say the rotting of the minds of America's youth is a problem that existed long before TikTok. And
It made it
it's like one of the great things about being young.
made it much worse. Kids at least used to read a book. I don't think kids ever see a book. They do not read, they scroll. Scrolling does not make you smart.
Have
not to
you
become
been in
overly
a high
serious,
school
I think it
English
is.
class?
Bro, this dude is one to talk
Have
about
you
being
been
smart.
to a high school? Have you been to a high school? They're literally. If you've been to a high school or college, you are required to read regardless. Like if you're in a high school English class, you will probably read 10 to 20 books before the year is over. Well, what the fuck? That's plenty. That's plenty.
I never read shit in school. I cheated. No, I actually like most of the time I wouldn't pay attention in class and I'd be writing instead. Because like
And listen, as a member of the cringe Zoomer generation, I just want to say that people our age still do read. Like that's a thing. Like a lot of people I know who are around my age and even some who are a little younger read. Like it's still relevant.
Do they not have TikTok?
Actually, a lot of them do. A lot of them do have TikTok.
Yeah.
Interesting.
TikTok doesn't destroy your brain. The thing is like with little kids, it is made to be repetitive, just like games are. But the thing is like before TikTok, they were probably like playing Candy Crush all the time and like those bright color games. Like they were still doing the same shit on their phone. Like TikTok, maybe they'll at least learn something. Like, because there is sometimes educational stuff. Like they'll be like people be like, let's talk about what kind of animal this is. Here's an animal.
I think it's bad for kids to use it under the age of 13, but before puberty. But like other than that,
well, yeah, it's probably
really
got
care.
like it probably says that right in the terms of service. Like you have to be a certain age.
Probably, yeah. But
it also says that it can access all data in your internet and all your other phones and shit in your network.
No. Oh, well, first of all, I want to be specific here. The thing about TikTok that people really don't like about it being dangerous is that even if you're not on TikTok, it's tracking you. That's why we're skeptical of it. Is that like it is literally just spyware. And like it's like but Facebook has done this before too, but Facebook like they had like the chip that they embedded in every website, and so like it was in every website's HTML, and like that was a thing before. But that's the thing is like it's not that, I don't think it's that big of a deal just because of that. Like you can regulate those things pretty easily, and I think that's a way more rational thing than to like freak out and think that it's like Chinese fucking mind control, like fucking Cold War bullshit. It just needs to be regulated so it's not spying.
It needs to be
people.
removed from the CCP is what it needs to be done, because it's literally just a tool to spy for them by an enemy state.
It's a pretty stupid
like
app
Facebook.
with a lot of stupid people on it, but yeah, I don't know anything about spyware, so I'm not going to comment on that. I just think a lot of the content that's created on the app is pretty.
You think
fucking
Facebook don't sell shit like that? Like everyone sells your information. China's gonna get it regardless. Like it's not that big. Who cares if China has your data? Like who cares if anyone has your data? You're like, go live in the woods, fucking Ted Kaczynski.
Is now perceived that the pandemic has made the mental health crisis that we previously had even worse. And there is a lot of discussion about the impact of social media and the isolation
it's
and the
absolutely
lack
valid.
of human contact that it develops
absolutely
on our health.
All right. Russell, what are your thoughts on the UFOs that were intercepted and shot down by the U.S. military last month? I don't know if they're referring to the Chinese balloons. They were not UFOs because we know what they were. They were Chinese balloons.
Wasn't only one a Chinese balloon? And then the second one was literally like AV kids. It was like a weird crossover of balloon hobbyists and AV kids who were just like making like a hobbyist balloon, and they fucking used a fucking missile to shoot it down, like a multi-$1,000 missile to shoot down these kids' balloons. But they were adults, they were like hobbyists. But I don't know what the third one was.
But there were other things. There were some things that they shot that we didn't get, and we don't know what they are. And there are the things that we haven't found out what they are after we did shoot them down.
I wonder whether or not the $14 trillion that have been granted to the Pentagon, 55% of which has ended up in the hands of the military-industrial complex, which surely American people are becoming weary of, needs occasionally to be boosted with fanciful ideas of extraterrestrial invasion. Maybe there needs to be a continual reminder that the skies themselves could become a threat unless Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, BAE Systems continue to profit. Elsewise, a balloon, a perfect metaphor, for it is naught but hot air, nothing inside it, shot down by a $400,000 missile, might be coming for your family.
But again, I mean,
Russell talks like he like in haikus, like he talks like he always has a poem written about shit. It's very off-putting. I don't know. Like everything he says sounds scripted.
That's because he's controlled opposition.
Should be skeptical and have open minds on everything. It is possible that there's life on other planets that are visiting us or scouting us. I mean, there are even the U.S. Even the U.S.
No, it's not possible. Actually, it's not really possible. No, that's just not true.
You need to keep your third eye open, John.
No, it's just not true. It's just impossible.
Open your third eye.
Look,
people from Mars are saying, "What's up?"
When you can convince me that faster than light travel is possible, then maybe. But the thing is that what people don't understand is that time moves differently when you start accelerating, and so eventually, there might be a point where you can't accelerate further because you would need negative mass and have to be going back in time to do so. So it's only like a theoretical thing that can happen, like warp drives and things like that. Like
just because we haven't figured it out yet doesn't mean it can't happen.
Well, no, there's one practical solution, and it's called a solar sail. And basically what it is that it's like basically a kite, and it uses the sun to power its boosters. And so like as long as it's continually accelerating, in theory it would eventually reach maximum velocity, but who knows how long that would be. Like the distance between shit in space is just unfathomable to people. They just don't get it. And it's like, it's really like, unless there's like some way to like, like there's no way you can't even like dematerialize something and like rematerialize it somewhere else. Like it's just not, it would still be limited by the speed of light.
Are you actually telling me that the Clone Wars didn't fucking happen?
Well, that did happen because that was a movie. So technically it did happen.
Do you mean to tell me that the CIS and the Republic didn't fight in space?
No, technically that did happen because they made a movie. So technically that is a real thing. It does exist. It exists more than actual UFOs coming to this planet.
I'm just saying it's possible. Carl Sagan said
it is possible. Okay. But if you think that something from another universe came all the way here and was just kind of dragging around and was shot down very easily, I think if it's a UFO, they would have done a little bit better in avoiding and evading that kind of missile.
First of all, We're not saying it's from another universe. We're saying it's from the same universe. Universe is very big. Very big.
Phil, I think Bernie raises a good
Oh
point.
yeah,
Like
well, big
E.T. would come all the
It's not another. Actually, who knows? The way quantum theory works, like maybe the way to do it is by traveling through parallel universes. Maybe
who
Bernie's
knows?
more accurate.
Potentially.
Welcome back
and then
to
trip up
Unsealed
outside
Alien
Elliot's
Files.
He's made it all the way here.
I agree. No,
That's the point.
but
That's the point,
I get-
Bernie.
well, okay, the Chinese balloon is different. Well, I'm not saying the Chinese balloon was from another universe or this
No,
universe.
I mean, it would have to be from China. If it's a Chinese balloon, and I mean that with all due respect,
Very good point.
Unless the
that's
China,
the least it can do.
well,
I was just gonna say, I think
I'm moving on.
the obvious.
You know,
Wise
what Bernie
decision.
back out here, he won't be happy if you're going to talk about extraterrestrials and
You're
balloons
right.
and that.
Okay.
If you're looking,
Inequality.
if you're looking for
Here I-
proof, if you're looking for proof that there's life in outer space, intelligent life in outer space, you need to look no further than Russell. So
Okay.
there's not really another accounting for how.
I'm glad that became a compliment, sir, because I was rearing up.
No, don't you worry.
All right.
Only compliments, my friend.
With all the emphasis on DEI, are we confusing equality of opportunity with trying to guarantee equity in outcomes? Okay, that's interesting because I think this word equity has come into the language in the last few years. And before that, we didn't hear it a lot. And I think a lot of people hear equity and they hear equality, that like it's the same word. And it's not the same word and the same concept. So how would you differentiate between equity and equality?
Well, equality, we talk about, I don't know what the answer to that is. Come to think of it, equality
That's
is
fucking appalling.
equality of opportunity. All right. We live in a society, we want all people
Right.
to have whatever color your skin is.
Equity, I think, is more guarantee of outcome, is it not?
I think so. I think that's
Okay. So which side do you come down on?
equality.
Equality.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Boys,
Good to answer.
Any comment on
You
that?
muted
one?
I just don't know if that's the definitional difference, but certainly this debate
may-
over
it
the
may not-
question of equality.
He
of
has no
outcome-
clue. He has no clue. He was like, what? I didn't even hear the question. I wasn't paying attention. This show fucking blows. We're moving on. I'm probably going to cut a lot of that one because that one was a bummer.
Yeah, that sucked.
Yeah.
John Helaman.
That was awful.
Helioman.
So the only thing we could do is just double down and make it way worse.
Again, you know the song and dance.
Oh, fuck.
Contrary, be like, mention the trans shit and just basically moved on from it. He's like, yeah, well, I'd like it to be as specific as possible so I can get it, which I think it was a clever and charismatic way to deflect. Did a good job. Here's the Dreaming Out right now.
I hosted that before, but I'll tell you, Bill, that I was able to let go of the experience and have never thought about it since.
See, this isn't even the before show. See, I was thinking, hey, maybe he did the actual before show, and we actually heard Bernie Sanders say something intelligent. But I think that's all it is. They had Bernie Sanders on, and like all they asked him is like some dumb question about equality and equity.
It's ridiculous. It's actually appalling.
What? Who makes this show? Like, who gives these questions? Because didn't we see something where Russell Brand was like bitching about how like the media is paid for?
Yeah.
There's got to be this has got to be like the extra show, right?
You would think so. I have no idea. We don't have HBO here.
Okay.
This is on you guys.
Hello. We hear the argument fairly often, but insert ex-socialist country failed or socialism has never been successful. Honestly, it's a strange argument to make. Let's humor this probably real person in your life, though. Firstly, how would they define socialism, or capitalism for that matter? Norway isn't socialist, for example. For ease, a capitalist country is one with private ownership of the means of production.
Norway is not socialist.
Etc., market mechanisms as a major determining force in the economy, and wage labor. The prototypical example of this is the United States. A socialist country is one where private property is heavily restricted, if not outright abolished. We're not talking about personal property.
Oh, dude, I know this guy. I know this guy. This is that Iraqi fella. Go on, though.
Practically owned by society through cooperatives and the state, there is some form of a national economic plan, and market mechanisms are either subordinate to the plan or entirely suppressed. We're referring to the likes of Cuba, the USSR, etc. as socialist in this video, and no, that doesn't make them perfect or any other nonsense you may have just thought of. There's, of course, a lot more nuance to this discussion, but I'm trying to keep it brief.
Really, really great book if you want to learn about this is Animal Farm. I hear this guy loves that book.
Long live Animal Farm.
Without clear definitions, you can't have a conversation, so check out these two videos if you're interested in further details.
Are we interested in further details? Why capitalism? Is socialism better than capitalism? I don't know about that. I don't know.
Now, more importantly, how would one define success? Longevity, quality of life, military strength?
Yeah, because I mean, I say this all the time. If just, you know, in a parallel universe, if we were socialist and the Soviets were capitalist, our societies would have the same flaws and they'd come up in the same ways. Our socialism would be flawed. We'd empower the rich. We'd use it to invest because, like, the government was giving money to NASA and shit like that at the time. Like, you know, and it wouldn't be like a socialist utopia the way people think of it. It would be exactly the same. It wouldn't really change that much at all. And you would think that, oh, maybe it would be better for minorities and things like that. But we would still be the same racists. Like, it wouldn't be any different at all.
Do you think these are like cultural flaws or structural flaws in the U.S. government, or a little bit of both?
Well,
it's structural. It's
both.
Country.
It's both because it's the thing is that you need to, and the United States is young. So that's where the advantage is that it's really easy to fix these things. But the pillars are based on certain things. And we need to recognize the contradictions in the Constitution and you know, coming to accounts where everyone is created equal and things like that. You know, some would argue that is a socialist thing where all men are created equal. But then that's where they start saying, the capitalists start being like, oh, but that's equity and equality, and like nobody cares about that. Like, that's not the point. Like, of course a doctor is going to make more money. Like, no shit, dude. Like,
equity is dumb.
And it's just, the thing is like, it's not like you're going to completely eliminate class hierarchies or things like that. It's just not going to happen because there's too much power already enlisted in the hierarchy structure. Like, you can only rebuild something from the bottom up, and the last thing you want to do is just destroy a successful country just to rebuild it.
Economic performance, political and diplomatic influence, ceasing to exist or not, measuring up or not to world powers at the time, reductions of total human suffering, perhaps. The conversation becomes stale because the comparisons are never even-keeled. Relatively politically stable countries that suffered no major external restriction and benefited from centuries of colonial extraction, for example France, are compared to semi-feudal former colonies that had just won their independence in the grand scheme of things and were made to suffer for it by those same formerly colonial powers, for example Vietnam. By all of these criteria, this or that socialist country meet all of those previous expectations, and in many cases far exceed them. On the flip side, many capitalist countries simply don't. The trick in this game, though, is to excuse or look over capitalism's failure at developing otherwise resource-rich countries. This is done through dedicated mechanisms of keeping them poor.
I don't even know what he's talking about at this point.
Every fucking time. It's whataboutism. It's, oh, well, yeah, but.
Yeah, poverty and the reasons. The thing is that, like, if the government, look at our housing already. You mean to tell me the government doesn't control where people live? You think the government doesn't segregate people and control where they live? You think it would be any better under like a socialist plan structured economy? Do you really think that would be better? Like, it would be exactly the fucking same.
I mean, this entire argument is just going to be the same tired, tanky talking points. He's probably going to bring up the Black Book of Communism. He's going to talk about how, not real socialism. It's just going to be the same tired bullshit that we've heard online for years.
Or while enriching the imperial.
Also, that whole not real socialism thing, that's like saying it's not real democracy. It's not real capitalism. Like, it's just one structure. You can have socialist capitalist states as well. Like, you can combine all these things. And this like utopian ideology of like how Stalin got it right. I don't know, guy.
Core, Western Europe, North America, etc. And even then, all those third world profits usually flow only to the already very wealthy top sectors of those countries in the imperial core. This delves into concepts of unequal exchange and
the imperial core. Bro, you mean to tell me the Clone Wars happened?
And value transference, a concept I'll touch on in another video. Let's actually get to comparing. We'll use the classic example. The USSR lasted 7 decades, despite starting off from a position as underdeveloped as India in the early 20th century. It was immediately besieged, sanctioned, diplomatically isolated and not given international recognition into the 30s, torn apart by a civil war and external invasion by over a dozen countries, overtaken by German invasion, World War II, in which it suffered far more than any other country in Europe, perpetually suffering from US and NATO attempts at destabilization afterwards, and plenty more. Already a comparison.
Well, maybe at the end of the war, when they showed up to negotiations, Stalin shouldn't have laughed at them and walked away and refused to talk after. That probably would
It
have
would
been
also.
a good start.
I can't wait for him to say that people had better lives in the Soviet Union. I'm so excited.
I mean, the thing is that like it was still like you look at the rural parts, like it was still awful. Like it only industrialized like a small section of the country, and it's a huge country. So it's not even that socialism benefited them, it's that they industrialized. And I always think of the Full Metal Alchemist, like they have to like build the Philosopher's Stone with blood and things like that, and I always find that as like a metaphor for industrialization. I don't know if that's what that show is about. I just know like in the movie they go to Germany and there's like air blimps and stuff, and I was like, okay, that kind of, I'm getting that this is about fascism and how the world is built by blood, like, and anime seems to be about that a lot. I guess Attack on Titan is about fascism too.
Yeah, it's about it's basically a stand-in for the Jews and the Nazis.
That's what I've heard. Except the Jews are the Titans.
Yes. So they've been sent
subverting
off to this
expectations.
island.
See, that's the thing is that they build you up to hate the Titans from square one, just like so you would be in the mindset of a Nazi.
Yes, it's such a good show. It's such a good show. One thing I also think that he might bring up is that North Korea was in front of South Korea for like the first 20 years or so.
Yeah, well, probably. I wonder how much of that has to do with like the military aid, because I don't know much about the Korean War, but I wonder like how invested our money went into there, like who because we were rebuilding Britain and all that stuff, and like the Soviet Union, I don't know where their money was being spread to. Like they may have had more focused in investments in North Korea, or it just might have been really good at first, because things can be really good at first, but that's like look at Libya with Gaddafi. It was good until people started disagreeing with him.
These factors into account is incredibly disingenuous. If we're going by quality of life, well, I've made several videos on that. In short, socialist countries in general provided a higher quality of life for their population at the same level of economic development, meaning whatever capabilities a country may have, all things equal, socialism would provide better housing, healthcare, education, women's rights, cultural development, and so on.
We had
women's rights is correct.
We had women's rights before like World War One is when we like started developing what's it called, suffrage was right at the end of World War One. It happened alongside World War One, so we already had that already. And as far as women's rights go, I don't know how
well. Okay, let me just clarify, because I know what this argument is. So this argument is saying that because women were included in the workforce that they had better rights, but no, they were just treated equally as shit. That's what he's talking about. Also, I think he's just to sort of give him a
women
fair
were working in factories since the Industrial Revolution.
Not in widespread capacity, though.
I mean, yeah, but also World War II had a big part of women working. Women were the ones who like held the home front down.
This is
so
what I was
it's actually
say.
It has nothing to do with like anything like that.
Of course it doesn't, but this is
What
what
was cool about, if we want to talk about what was cool about the Soviet Union, it was their use of women in war, and how they weren't afraid to use women in their best role to be like scout snipers. Like,
I mean, I guess, but
that was awesome.
What I was going to say was that what they argue is that ratio of time from formation to granting of suffrage was shorter. That's their cope.
It could be. I mean, but also, like, I don't think there's so much. It's too narrow-minded to just look at like economic and like things like that. Like, you can't really make a comparison like that on like what country takes this long to develop under certain economic conditions, and what country takes this long to develop, because it's like you have cultural conditions and things like that. Like, look at Afghanistan. Like,
of course,
you could dump tons of money into Afghanistan and nothing happened because the culture has to develop alongside it. But now in Somalia, like, we have a lot of people who are now saying like fuck you to Al Qaeda, and like just taking up arms as militia just to like defend their land and things like that because they're sick of like Al Qaeda. So like, it's kind of like Somalia is kind of developing on its own instead of like the US trying to force militias to exist and things like that. They've come into power through their own. The government has incentivized these people to make sure they'll be protected and things like that. So it's like, as much as the US tries to hold up these states, I don't think they really can at the same time. I mean, speaking of which, we're in Iraq right now trying to fix that mess with the fucking government deadlock.
Than if the country were to be capitalist. You get some common objections to this point, but they all fall flat. Skewed data, old research, blah blah, etc., which I deal with in the above videos you just saw on screen. Moving on, the idea of military strength is silly to even mention, as the greatest, unfounded honestly, fear of the US was the USSR's military capability, which, although powerful, was used far less liberally than America's. In fact, the USSR had pleaded with the US to stop the arms race, frequently stating that whatever you develop, with neutron bomb development,
Okay, this is important because this is actually a good point that he's addressing here. Okay, when they're pleading with the U.S. to stop the arms race, as we have said before, Eisenhower is a fucking psychopath. All right, Eisenhower, terrible guy. But the good thing is that with the U.S. is that they could only be around for a little bit of time. Brezhnev, on the other hand, ended his career by committing a genocide in Afghanistan. So good for you, eyebrows.
Star Wars program, etc., being prime examples. It was less an arms race in reality and more of a keeping up parity with a warmongering United States, which, need I remind you, has been at war 225 out of 243 years since 1776. Regardless, even military strength, a ridiculous yardstick that falls apart at further scrutiny, isn't valid for this.
That's just a cope because the Soviet Union couldn't fucking be united enough to have peasants strike out. Like, we know that they had a peasant revolution. And that's why Lenin took advantage of Lenin literally empowered the peasants and then fucked them over. He's an asshole.
Yeah, well, also because they were incompetent, like, in comparison when we're talking about military technology. It's like, oh, they're trying to keep parity with the U.S. It's like, no, they weren't. They were trying to reach the same level as the U.S. They just weren't as good at developing military technology. It's a massive cope.
The F-15 is a perfect example of what America does when it does what the USSR was always doing. The F-15 was designed to beat a plane that didn't exist. And that plane is still one of the most dominant airframes ever made.
Precisely. You're entirely right. You're entirely right.
So to say that the USSR was on par with the United States is fundamentally retarded.
Also, the thing is,
you are an idiot.
This is also a reduction because we also have to keep in mind that the real reason where these talking points actually come from, the source of them in the rhetoric, well, they come from the nuclear race. Okay, it's not so much the weapon technology because, come on, the AK was better than the M16. You know, it's nukes. The nukes were the problem. Eisenhower was the problem. Eisenhower was a fucking psychopath. Eisenhower I think he almost used them in Korea. Who was that? Who was in Korea that almost used them?
That was probably Eisenhower.
Wasn't it McCarthy that suggested it?
I just know that I think the president said no, but Eisenhower was the general trying to do it. I'll look it up when I hit play.
Analysis. Economic performance is also one of those things that goes without saying. The USSR started as a peasant backwater where wooden plows were being used, and within 3 decades had conquered the cosmos. They rose to such a high level that to this day people still unfairly compare it to the US, a country that had 2 centuries of development ahead of the USSR and started off in far better circumstances, also not forgetting the horror of the enslavement of one race and the genocide of another. Take a look at the book The Triumph of Evil.
Okay, it was General MacArthur.
That's what I just pulled up. Douglas MacArthur and Truman.
I said the wrong name. I said McCarthy, didn't I?
Oh, I think everyone would have filled in the blank. Also, did you see I shared it on the page? It was a quote of
Truman was the president at the time, by the way, guys.
Okay, thanks, Ace. But it was Truman, and he was talking to Oppenheimer, and he was like, "Don't bring that guy around here again. He's so fucking annoying. He didn't drop the bomb. I did." Because Oppenheimer was crying like, "I got blood on my hands. I got blood on my hands." And Truman was like, hated him. He's like, "Don't ever bring him back here. I dropped the bomb."
That guy's a massive pussy, and he didn't even fucking do anything. What a fucking bitch.
Yeah, that's literally what he says. So funny.
Someone get him a tampon. Like.
On top of this, the USSR had to endure the aforementioned brutal civil war, multiple invasions, sanctions, destruction brought about by the Germans as they destroyed everything they came across, etc., etc. This point cannot be understated, because it's always forgotten, and many times omitted intentionally from the conversation. Through all these trials, the Soviet Union not only recovered, but was competing with history's largest power, the United States, and even surpassing it in certain cases. Undoubtedly, had it not been illegally dissolved against the democratic will of the Soviet people, it may have even surpassed the US in our current age. The second rapidly rising superpower, this time of the 21st century, is the People's
like the USSR?
Illegally dissolved. Illegally dissolved. But the thing is the countries succeeded, and the USSR did not have the capability to keep the Union together. Just like, like America, when we had a secession, our Union went in and we held that shit down. Russia was not able to do that, and that's why they don't have a union. That's the point of calling it a union.
Republic of China,
it wasn't even a union. It was a forced collaboration of states by force.
I mean, I'm sure some Southerners would tell you that too, because it kind of happened that way, where we needed to join together to pool our resources to take down the crown, and then also the crown was working with the natives the entire time, doing raids on resources that they wanted.
Interesting.
So, I mean, that's who was selling them their guns when, like, Abraham Lincoln hung all of them.
Yeah.
Achieved its current level of development without Mao-era policies and accomplishments. In fact, China is expected to surpass the United States in just a few years, and will do this with a population more.
Whoa. Surpass them in what? Surpass them in what?
They won't. We've heard this conversation since 2002. They're not surpassing
They should have stuck with the Deng Xiaoping,
Yeah.
Deng Xiaoping.
They should have. They fucked up.
We could admit that he did Tiananmen Square and still say that he was the right choice for China. His policy was great, and we should have stuck. If they were stuck to the Deng Xiaoping policy, they would probably be on par with how developed Taiwan is. I mean, just look at Taiwan. Taiwan developed under, then he's going to say that it's the West's fault that China wasn't able to develop it like Taiwan was. But Taiwan
the West is the reason China developed. The rest literally funds China's development.
Yeah, let's give credit where credit's due. To the genocidal maniac who killed his own people with tanks. He's the reason China developed. He industrialized them, not Mao. Mao's a fucking asshole. Fuck Mao.
Or less confident in their development and agreeing with the general direction their government is taking. At least a lot more than the US and other contemporary liberal states, along with a doubling of real income by the decade and more. Thus I'm mentioning all the other examples that can be listed from Cuba to Vietnam and beyond. Breaking the ties of neo-colonial dependence and resource extraction to benefit the actual population of those third world countries over the profits of people unfathomably wealthy and politically connected within the imperial core is the program of socialism, both historically as well as today. Most clearly of all, it showed in all of those countries, despite the sanctions and other hurdles artificially placed upon them. Honestly, it should go without saying, but if socialism will fail on its own inevitably, why does the US spend so many billions to sabotage, invade, bomb, sanction, diplomatically isolate, and assassinate? For just one example, take a look at this video.
Nukes. Nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons and power and a little bit of oil if we're considering that NATO vowed to keep the shipping lanes open. I mean, that is a Chomsky reference, but it's true. We really thought that we could be the force that just made global trade function forever, and the US and NATO thinks that that's their role, but it just can't be done by them alone.
Video here. Back to the video in just a second. Let's hear from today's sponsor, Atlas VPN. For a lot of reasons, under $2 per month, if you can believe it. Description below. If we were to go by social, political, or diplomatic influence, well, this too is fairly clear. Communism was considered to be the greatest threat to the status quo in the 20th century, and continues to be. Practically every single revolutionary or independence movement sought aid and diplomatic support from the USSR. Meanwhile, every puppet dictator from Latin America to Africa ran to the US for protection. Every genuine progressive domestic movement has had some socialist.
I just want to really point this out because a lot of people don't emphasize this. Cuba was an independent state with an own independent doctrine. It had nothing to do with the USSR. Yes, they did work together, but Cuba had Fidel. You can look at him. He had very clear policies of not being dependent on another country. And the Cuban Missile Crisis, he actually was really upset about because it put him in a position where he would always be an enemy of the United States, and he didn't necessarily want it to be that way. And Fidel Castro also funded a lot of revolutions in Africa and things like that. So I think he's upstarted Somalia. I think Somalia's war started because of him. So Somalia might be in the condition it is today because of Castro, but I'm not sure what exactly he did. But he did a lot down there, and the Soviets loved it because they didn't have to get involved to spread communism. So it worked out to be a mutually beneficial relationship. But just how like the Soviets and China are separate communist entities, so was Castro. And so it just happened to be that the communists are going to be more friendly with the communists and the capitalist powers are going to be more friendly with the capitalist powers. But just like the United States doesn't own a NATO or France or the EU or anything like that, these were independent empires. Because that's the language we're going to use today.
That's the main point.
Flavor, usually of the pro-existing socialism type, from the US to Latin America, and each one was brutally shut down with American help and fear of the influence of socialist thought. Furthermore, I don't think the recent upswing in anti-communist media and publication has gone unnoticed either. How about ceasing to exist? Does that mean a country has failed? Iraq, my country, is a massive mess, yet it still exists in some certain political order. Does that mean it's succeeding? If you doubt its failure, then check out my 2 recent videos on Iraq here. These terms are so vague and just pointless. They only serve to end the conversation before this even started. How many countless capitalist countries have quote-unquote failed because of economic collapse, political change, or military takeover? Far more than socialist countries, I can assure you.
Okay,
regarding
hang on.
Because there are far more capitalist countries.
No. But the thing is that the collapse of the Soviet Union was unlike anything else. All right, like you just can't governments go into deadlock, governments go into collapse, but comparing just the standard collapse of any government, even though there's more capitalist states and they collapse more, comparing any collapse to the collapse of the Soviet Union is crazy because no country collapses and fragments into like 20 different countries and like has to fucking commit genocides in Chechnya to hold itself together because more revolutions could happen if they don't. Like the collapse of the Soviet Union was huge. It was like fall of an empire level. It was like there's not going to probably be another fall like that.
Human suffering.
Yeah.
This one is tricky to calculate.
While we're on the topic of Chechnya, never mind staging the bombing of
I don't believe they did.
Entire
I don't believe they did.
You don't? I think they did.
I do not trust the Litvinenko is the main source of that. I do not trust a word Litvinenko says. He's inflated everything. He's basically the fucking he's a Western fucking puppet. He says whatever he can to get attention and on TV. He was Putin's opposition, and he was backed by a different oligarch, an enemy oligarch. He lost power because Putin gained power. He's no different than Putin. He's just an agent just like Putin. He was trying to use the space to his benefit to try and gain power in his own country. Everything that dude said was a fucking lie. And like Putin kind of did the world a favor by clearing like the information space for us with that guy. Like he I just don't trust a word he says about anything. He needs to have a secondary source.
Fair enough.
Same with Seymour Hesh. Got to have a secondary source, dog. I just don't trust you enough.
Seymour Hesh, yeah. I know about that. Yeah.
But yeah, so the thing is that the one bombing that they suspected was staged or something like that. It could have been like a covert training type thing as well, because they said they saw like the military loading in powders as explosives or stuff. Because the one that they think is staged, that they say is like a setup for the second war, is like that one. They like foiled a bombing, but like I don't know. The war was like already in progress at that point, and then also like I think did the theater hostage come after the war? That was after, right? The theater hostages.
Yeah, after or around the end. Yeah.
Yeah, because like he also claims stuff like that, like that's an inside job too, and like
Oh yeah, no, that's insane. That was not an inside job. No.
Yeah.
Of course, far more has occurred under capitalism than under socialism, and if you believe the 100 million lie that's been reproduced time and time again, just know that it's all, well, nonsense. They count non-births through extrapolation of fertility data. They count dead Nazis on the Eastern Front in the total. They ate your sleight of hand at 50,000 or a million just for the memes, amongst other fantasies. If you're interested in a deeper depth,
Did I call
check out
it?
my Death to All Capitalism video here.
I fucking called it. And
Regardless,
that video
socialism has been
will
empirically proven
only
through numerous
be
studies.
talking about, capitalism caused famine. Fuck off. These are direct deaths, not this, but like the deaths are direct deaths at the behest of a communist policy or incompetence. The numbers are probably not that high. They could be higher, but they're most likely lower. But they are in the tens of millions, possibly over 50 million.
Well, dude, he literally just said in the video he was like infant mortality. I was like, oh, that's not a good thing, okay? If you're a country with a high rate of infant mortality, it probably means doing something wrong. So I think it would be fair if we're talking about, I don't know, any communist country that had a high infant mortality rate or had like a significant infant mortality rate, and they include that under the deaths of communism, that's fair.
Infant
'Cause that
mortality
should
is
not
also
be happening.
it's key linked to poverty. Infant mortality is directly linked to poverty because it all has to do with malnourishment and the nourishment of the mother and how, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Like Yemen has a high infant mortality because of its conditions. We can talk about how we can blame a lot of that on the global powers, but to just blame it on the U.S. is silly. You have to blame it on everyone. Everyone is committing war crimes in Yemen. It's kind of toned down now, but like we can objectively all say Yemen is fucked, And like anyone who tries to like justify someone's existence in Yemen is a bad faith actor. Like Yemen is just fucked by every party in there. And I don't even know if there's a solution to it.
To provide better healthcare outcomes, better nutrition, more equitable access to healthcare and cultural facilities, as well as a more robust system of care in general in society. Things regular people actually need, use, and objectively define quality of life. Likewise, in the Soviet example with leisure, more free time, more cultural centers, spas, retreats for regular people, regular day-to-day life, basically no rent, incredibly cheap staples, widespread and accessible public transport, etc., and even working life with shorter and less demanding
Incredibly
working days
subsidized by
there to
government
maximize
and
profit. It's good to keep in mind to not fall into the trap. Austria, for example, might be nice in their living standards, but Senegal, for example, doesn't and perhaps cannot provide these amenities, despite both of them being capitalist. Socialism so far has been the only system that has been both.
First of all, we can't just say countries like Senegal are capitalist because like capitalist kind of has to have like required, like you need to be able to like be making like money and like run like a free market and things like that. There's certain countries that are just not capitalist or not socialist or communist or anything like that. They're just certain countries. They're just, a republic or a democracy or a dictatorship. It doesn't necessarily have to be capitalist because they don't
They're
really
just
have the
trying to
economic
make things
decisions
work.
anyway. Yeah, exactly. It's like the
Senegal
world is
literally
done.
just trying to make shit work.
Yeah. The world is done in U.S. dollars and capitalism because they were the standing economy after World War II. It's just how it is. It's the global trade exists. It's not going anywhere. Everyone is linked together. It's a very good thing to keep things together linked like that. And yes, it could be run better and it could be like more brought down to benefit countries like Senegal. But at the same time, the powerful have the money and they are going to say like, what do we get out of it? So you're just doomed to be fucked, and it's going to happen with socialism as well. I don't see socialism lifting up. I don't see the USR going in and lifting up Africa. So guillotines, I mean, that can happen. Technically, they do say Stalin committed a reign of terror, so I don't know. I don't know enough about Stalin to say if he was a terrorist or not.
Both economically capable and politically willing to provide these benefits for their populations as a whole. Let's discuss failure then. How would you define failure? Collapse? In that case, did the Roman Empire?
I would define you as failure, bro.
Yes,
did the
Roman
numerous
Empire
Portuguese
failed.
republics fail? Terms need to be
Yes.
defined. To me, it sounds as more of an emotional attack rather than an objective.
There was also multiple Roman empires.
And they all failed.
But the thing is like, and also like there was certain times there was a certain times where there was breakups of certain empires that were huge, like the fall of the Ottoman Empire. Like that was as big as the breakup of the Soviet Union. Like, and like the Ottoman Empire didn't necessarily like, you know, like these empires don't necessarily collapse because they're defeated in like a combat situation. Like they can no longer maintain control and things like that. And I mean, the U.S. Just because it never had to colonialize and we could exploit the people in the land that we already had here, it had a huge advantage in this area. And Russia could have done the same thing if they had better land in their borders, but they don't. And that's really what it comes down to. It doesn't really come down to the fact that they were communist or socialist or democratic or whatever. It just comes down to Russia doesn't have a lot of shit going for it.
Characterization. If equally poor starting position capitalist countries achieved the same level of development as socialist countries, along with all the hurdles artificially placed upon them, they'd be considered miracles. Likewise, when your average capitalist country, think Bangladesh, Ecuador, Kenya, etc., collapses from some form of political order, it's never seen as a failing.
Average capitalist country.
Or some other.
Average cap. I mean, Bangladesh is important. What did he say down here?
Bangladesh and doing like pretty.
What's this country?
Like ending.
Ethiopia.
That's Kenya.
Bro. Kenya. Yeah.
What's this country though? Over in South America.
We said Ecuador.
That's Ecuador. I'm saying aren't Ecuador and like Bangladesh doing pretty well, all things considered?
Bangladesh is fine. Bangladesh has they're very important in the
Bangladesh
garment industry.
Is doing pretty. They do
have slavery.
People also
though.
say they're doing better.
They are
than,
a slave
than
state. I wouldn't define
India
them as capitalism.
Pakistan.
They're a slave state. They're not a capitalist state. Bangladesh.
How do you
just
what
like
do you mean by a slave
just like
state?
the Arab
Like,
Emirates are a slave state, not a capitalist state. Their economy
You're
is
gonna
built off of
okay.
slaves.
Now you're gonna have to expand on what you mean by a slave state.
So
terms matter.
well, because the thing is that
no, you're saying Bangladesh is a slave state. I don't know what you mean.
Their economy is built off of slavery because of how the garment industry works. It's not so people think like shackles and chains and stuff like that. A lot of it is just stuff like wage slavery and things like that, and like migrant labor exploitation. The U.S. still does this a little bit with our borders too. We do exploit migrants and things like that.
A little bit.
But Bangladesh, there's a certain threshold where like it meets into these unfair conditions and it becomes slavery. And Bangladesh does have an issue there. And you know, and people will say things like Qatar. Qatar, they say that the Colosseum was built off slaves, but technically it was migrant workers, you know? So it really depends on how lenient we are doing the term slavery. I would say they are slaves. Like,
I mean, that stadium was definitely built by slaves.
Yeah, and like a lot of historical slavery were contracts, like you were indentured for 6 months to stuff like that. And a lot of slaves did make wages. That's what a lot of people don't understand. Like they have this image of the American slave ships with like Amistad and things like that. But slavery is a very, very diverse industry, just like human trafficking is. You know, like there's so many ways that something can qualify as human trafficking. And India also is the #1 place where slaves and they call them domestic workers, but they're like house slaves, you know, and they have them like India has a huge problem with it. That region of Southeast Asia is just like has a really huge problem with modern slavery. So as far as Kenya goes, Kenya is a really great example of a really well developing. I would say they are a capitalist country. Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda, they are forming a very economic powerhouse in Africa. I would like to see more rhetoric.
Right, the East African Federation and all that.
Yeah, like I want to see more rhetoric like Ghana has. And like Congo is getting kind of lippy with France. I'd like to Congo to really finally say like we do not fucking need, but they do because they have like the insurgencies and shit like that, and the Congo is kind of corrupt. But I would live in Kenya. Kenya is a great country. It's a great developing capitalist country.
I'm saying like he brings up all three of these countries and they're all doing decently.
Mm-hmm. I don't know much about Ecuador though.
Ecuador had a president, I want to say from like 2006 to somewhat recently, and he or prime minister, I don't know which one they used, and he did a pretty good job at developing like a social safety net and like benefits and things like that.
Yeah, and they also had a lot of South America has a lot of socialist policy as well. Like I think of South America as being very socialist in general. I don't think of, besides Chile, I don't really think of any of them being capitalist at all. I think of them all as socialist states. And it's not going to be how this guy defines socialism, because it has to be like whatever. Everything is capitalism except for like the people who he has to apologize and deny their massacres for.
That's because he has no idea what socialism or communism is.
He read the book.
A nebulous explanation. It seems that only liberal, quote-unquote, democracies are spared from being considered a failure in the fullest sense. Here's some food for thought. The United States...
Israel is a failed country. Everyone says this. Israel has a failed government. They've had a failed government, and that's why we, again, are seeing them develop into a dictatorship. Israel is a failed country, but they're still able to project their power. They're still able to hold, down peace. They're still able to peace. I'm talking about like with police, and also they're able to kill Palestinians. But the country is a failed state. It's just a fact.
States is the richest country on earth, and arguably in all of history. Yet, stagnant real wages despite skyrocketing productivity. Most Americans can't afford a $500 emergency. People are drowning in student and other debt. There is no place in the US where minimum wage workers can afford rent, and nearly half of Americans don't earn enough to afford even a one-bedroom rental. Inflation is destroying savings and making any likelihood of ever owning...
What?
That's because of BlackRock and government interference.
Well,
in the market.
This has to go back to the United States being a global power, and like it all the resources are going to channel upward. So we have almost our own Vanguard class, and I think even one of the companies that fuck people over is Vanguard. I think that's what they're called.
Yes, it's like, Vanguard and BlackRock.
But the thing is like these are not capitalist issues. These are issues that are specific to America, and like the fact that the corporations and wealthy it's developing into like a very oligarchic system, and there needs to be some like trust busting type, like we need to break some shit up, and a lot of shit needs to be changed. But like, I mean, we got student debt forgiveness that just happened. I mean, that was kind of cool. Like there's a lot of problems with America, but it's not like it's gonna not continue profiting. Like it's still gonna profit, and it's gonna come at the cost of the people, just like any other power.
Something an actual fantasy. Infrastructure is crumbling, widening income inequality, climate catastrophe, American government support for every fascist tyrant and every dictator. I could go on and on. Rampant poverty, unemployment.
Did you see the Code Pink sign?
Yeah, unfortunately.
I found out that she went on Chinese state media and all of that sort of stuff.
Oh yeah, she's awful.
So that's kind of
amongst
fun.
many other things. People prefer to die rather than go into medical debt. Stable employment and workers' rights are regularly trampled in pursuit of profits, as we've seen in Ohio recently. School shootings, crumbling education. Is this not failure?
No, it's not failure, because sure, there's cultural failings in every country, but like, no, it's not a failure. And also, what school shootings have to do with capitalism?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
What about crime? We have a serious crime problem. We have a serious problem with the importation of drugs, even though that we could treat the problem. We have a serious problem of letting international criminals and terrorists to bank in our country to make a profit off of it.
Daily reminder that we should be paying a shitload of more money for Narcan. Keep going, though.
To remind you, this is with no sanctions on the US, no foreign invasion, no internal sabotage, nothing. The American government has every privilege. It is the political, military, and economic hegemon. It regularly dictates the policy of other countries thousands of miles away to its own benefit. It dictates international trade and dominates it through its currency. It can get away with whatever it wants and still manages to not guarantee a respectable and dignified existence for all or even most of its citizens.
Yeah, it's bullshit. And even if we were a socialist country, it would probably still be the same. We would probably have healthcare, and that's about it. And it would be like really shit healthcare, and they would like.
It would be like Canada.
No. It would be different than
Nah,
that.
Canada is not as bad as you think. See, I see you smiling, Jack. That's huge bait. But yeah, go ahead.
They would make it so like there would be like a different type of balance between the worker, but it still wouldn't generally like you would basically have, because anyone can get healthcare right now. I don't know if people are aware of this, but you qualify for healthcare. If you have no job, you can get healthcare. Like
aren't there people who are still on Obamacare?
Yes, I am.
Like
I have healthcare because of the Affordable Care Act. I paid nothing for my healthcare.
There's millions
but
of people who are still on Obamacare.
Like I have to go the people who like take insurance is completely different as well, because a lot of people just like a dentist. A lot of them just don't take insurance.
Because
so like
pricks.
Yeah, so like the dentist that I had to go to, it was like it looked like it was from the 70s, and the guy was like taking his watch off over his sterile glove.
Oh fuck.
And then I was like never going back there, because like he worked on the tooth that I wasn't having a problem with. So I was like, I'm never going back to this guy. And like I must have put some bad juju on him with that energy, because he later got hit by a car and died.
Cuba, a sanctioned third world nation targeted by the largest superpower ever known, has a thriving and efficient healthcare system that is the envy of all developing countries.
No. This is a known lie. I encourage everyone to actually go and look up the reports on exploitation of Cuba's doctors. It is unacceptable. Just like the conditions of the American worker is unacceptable. Cuba is not the model you think it of. These people are basically slaves that they're exploited by their state. Like they have to go under these contracts, and they don't get any wages when they put them overseas. They like pay them shit. They're basically using their doctors as an export migrant labor source. It's awful.
Shout out to the Cuban doctors.
Yes, the Cuban doctors are great doctors.
They're very good people.
They're
but
good
yeah, no,
doctors.
The
but
system
it's
is
bullshit
fucked.
how they are treated.
Yeah.
It's not something that we should be like praising Cuba for. Like their healthcare system is like their healthcare industry is great though. They definitely have.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah,
they definitely have a healthcare based economy, just like ours is based off of weapons and blood. Theirs is kind of based off of the opposite.
Than the United States when it comes to life expectancy, infant mortality, child malnutrition, literacy, and far more. How is this not success in comparison? Capitalism is a system built on top of the cancer cell logic of infinite growth despite a finite planet with finite resources. A system that breaks down every few years as a result of inherent boom and bust cycles, of which young people have experienced several once-in-a-lifetime economic catastrophes. A system where people's health and the environment are regularly sacrificed on the altar of profit. This is the definition of failure. The capitalist system working as it's supposed to. But the fallacy in all this is to ignore these facts and to only consider the richest countries as capitalist, France, US, Britain, etc., while ignoring...
I already said this, yes. The rich, like, yes, certain countries are capitalist, other ones are not. You have to make international transactions on the capitalist market, so it tends to have a more capitalist structure throughout countries just because it's easier for them to function that way. But it's not necessarily a capitalist country. Like they have to the capitalist motivation of these countries. They're sometimes they're oligarchical, sometimes they're dictatorships. But like Ghana, for example, they are more invested in building their country than making profit. That is not a capitalist country.
or in places like Peru, Bhutan, the Congo, Moldova, or other less
Bhutan is a great example of a non-capitalist country.
palatable yet fully capitalist examples. To use the Richard Wolff line, if you had a car or electrical grid system or even a roommate as unstable as capitalism, you would have left a long time ago. Again, I reiterate my earlier point. The insert
that's a
ex-socialist
great
country failed
fucking
statement.
quote.
I would
That's-
love
that's-
it. I would love it. I think we need to go beyond capitalism. It's run its course.
That's such a fucking horrible quote.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, let me compare it to an electric car or a roommate.
I like Richard Wolff, but he kind of does make like it's
Just
like
a
a
shitty
socialism for
one-liner.
dummies.
Yeah, that's what
But
it
it's a
sounds
good
like.
he's a great introduction to how socialism works, and you'll begin to like understand how it works. I think he's a great educational tool. More like I would rather listen to him than like Zizek. Like Zizek I cannot stand. Like it's just like, bro, get to the fucking point.
Zizek is I don't know if you ever read any of his books, but even his books
I've read articles and like quit every time. I can't do it.
His books are like written in the way he speaks, where he like goes on these fucking tangents.
I know. It's
is a sad and petty non-argument used to end the dialogue before it even begins. Its use shows less of a nuanced understanding of history and more a certain level of ignorance, usually mixed with American exceptionalism or a severe malign scrutiny placed over socialist nations that doesn't cross over to capitalist thoughts, unsurprisingly.
Pause. Socialists, like these communist types on YouTube and just social media in general, use the term American exceptionalism really loosely.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I don't think they know what that means. Just because someone in the U.S. hasn't necessarily like been outside the country or doesn't understand that there are better ways of life or whatever, does not mean that they're suffering from American exceptionalism. Most Americans do not believe that like things are the way they are in America because it's the best system in the world. It's because they just don't know like anything else. They've never lived anywhere in any other country.
The people that nobody listens to on the television will say that about how it's, like
yeah,
PragerU is like making that argument and things like that.
Exactly. But like they need to, these people use the term American exceptionalism way too loosely.
Yeah.
Honestly is the crux of the matter. The most minute negative of a socialist country is not only magnified, it's blown out of proportion or outright lied about. And the largest, most blatant positives are so heavily, and unfairly, and in many cases incorrectly, scrutinized as to diminish their accomplishments and trivialize their struggles. Meanwhile, capitalist countries, usually wealthy Western ones, get a pass. I'll give you an example. The East German secret police, the Stasi, is spoken of in ill terms to this day, hilariously by Americans who live in practically bugged houses with numerous public and private agencies spying on their every word, move.
This is fucking... Are we
Can
really
we just be
compare
very
the
clear
NSA
that the East German government was a successor to the Third Reich? Can we just be very clear on that specifically? They are a direct descendant of the Third Reich.
Are we gonna do whataboutism on the Stasi right now? Oh my fucking god!
What about the Gestapos?
Move and of course purchase. Where their every detail is intimately known, they will condemn the East Germans while not batting an eye at their own peculiar situation. Of course, that's not to absolve the Stasi, but to give you food for thought. You were told that East Germany was the...
I'm glad he said that. I'm glad he said that. Like, he gets points for that, saying that, like, well, I'm not saying the Stasi were good, even though I'm sure he actually does believe that and does do it. Just the fact that he said that, I think that's a good, we can give a clap to that.
Look, man, the CIA has never come knocking on the door of me or anyone I know and taken us in the middle of the night. So
they have in other countries.
In other countries, sure, but you got to do something really fucked up, or you got to be under suspicion of something really fucked up for the CIA to come and get you. The Stasi, you didn't have to do much back in the day. You didn't have to do much.
Yeah, and it's more of a, like that's the thing is like police can take many roles, and like the privatization type police, or even though like it's not private how people would think economically, but you know, the police are working with a specific interest. They're not like reducing crime or things like that. They have a certain goal
Also,
that's in line with the government.
that is another thing that he's bringing up. Is like, I feel like it's kind of a weird comparison because the CIA is an intelligence agency, whereas the Stasi was kind of like a law enforcement agency. Am I wrong to say
That is a good point.
Like,
Yeah, the CIA technically cannot arrest anyone.
yeah, like I don't know. It's and like coming from an Egyptian background, I feel like, you know, our intelligence agency, or like, and Arabs all know this, right? The mukhabarat. If you talk about the mukhabarat, the intelligence in any country is like, yeah, they can come and get you for pretty much any reason, and that's more like this guy should know this because he's Iraqi, but he does. I don't know. That's a better comparison than the CIA and the Stasi. It's just fucking dumb. Anyhow,
height of totalitarianism for this, but you living in a hellscape far more grotesque, and they tell you not to worry, as if you ever worried at all. If you're interested in East Germany, take a look at the book Stasi State or Socialist Paradise for a deeper dive.
This guy
Regardless,
does a really
it's a
good job of
reproducible
like
pattern.
plugging his videos as well. Like he plugs sources, be like, check this out, check this video out. Like, see, he has really good management of his YouTube channel. He's constantly recommending things that he's already done and linking back to his work and things like that. Like that's really, really good content creation right there.
Some will condemn Soviet utilitarian housing blocks meant for temporary post-war housing, while living in incredibly small apartments themselves, where 2/3 of their paychecks go towards rent and homelessness is rampant. If you instantly
I'm not
recoil
gonna
when
lie to you. I'm not gonna lie to you. I think Soviet and like, you know, Eastern Bloc like housing is one of the better parts of it. I think it's. I just think it's not pretty. It's not pretty.
I think
but
both
I
are
think
over memed a little bit.
it's definitely not pretty like Eastern Bloc housing, like apartments and stuff. But it was very efficient and is very efficient. A lot of people still live in those apartments. I think it's pretty smart.
They also had the land to build. When we're looking at New York City, you're like, what are you doing? Like you're built, like you can't really like change the sewer layouts.
Well,
New York City is an infrastructure mess.
This is another thing that people bring up a lot in discussions about New York City. It's like, how can a minimum wage or service worker afford rent in New York or like wherever? It's like they don't live in New York City. They usually live outside the city. They live in Yonkers. They not everybody who works in New York or New Jersey, they live in New Jersey or Long Island or wherever. They don't live in New York City. These people who don't make enough money to pay the rent in New York City. That's the thing that people don't understand. They commute about
Even
like 45
I know
minutes
this.
to an hour.
And that's
Yeah,
why,
no,
how city
that's
life
why we
works.
don't stop
that
people who
exactly.
got
But
told.
people don't like bring up all this shit about how people can't afford rent in like insert any big city here. You probably heard, Jack, you probably heard this about Melbourne and Sydney or whatever, but it's like they bring this up about Vancouver, they bring this up about like New York City, they bring this up about Los Angeles. It's like, dude, people who work there, half, if not more than half of them, do not live there. They live 45 minutes to an hour away. That's just how it works. But it's like it's such a common known thing of life, and they just do not recognize it. They never bring it up.
Socialism or communism. Ask yourself why. Maybe those that continuously villainize socialist examples and ideas have a vested interest in keeping the population ignorant of the facts. But those who own everything,
Yes,
those with all the
Elon Musk
money,
is an
they would
idiot.
never lie, right? And that's about it for today. If you
But I'd say I'd give that video a B-. I mean, it was short. It was predictable. We knew exactly what it was going to say. We've heard this all before.
enjoy what I do, then please.
So there's that. B-. I think he's a pretty good content creator. Keep it up.